The inner critic. Hello, this is Chris speaking, Shores of Infinity, with a video about the inner critic. What is the inner critic? You have several voices in your head, probably. Unless you already have no voices in your head anymore, then congratulations. But if you still have unbidden voices and opinions and internal dialogue in your head, then it is helpful to differentiate between several voices. In different systems of psychology, like internal family systems and radical allowing and so on, some of these voices have been given names. And Mike Helvig has called two of them the inner critic and the inner rebel. I find this very helpful, and I want to talk about the inner critic today. The inner critic is criticizing others as well as yourself in your inner dialogues, into these conversations you experience in your head, and you think that's your own thoughts. Well, it partly is, it partly isn't, because it's not voluntary. You don't choose to have this conversation in your head, it just happens. So whenever you get upset about other people making mistakes, or you yourself making mistakes, calling them stupid and worthless and whatever, that's the inner critic. If you, for example, at the computer, you don't understand something and you get really upset, not only at the computer and the software, but also at yourself for not understanding it. I'm so stupid. Every time the same. Why can't I learn this? Or if you forget your key for the 100th time, this chastising, critical voices in your head. That's the inner critic. This inner critic treats others as critical as yourself, or yourself as critically as you. Criticizing, but not in a good way. There is also a way to critique people in a productive way. That's not it. It's really beating down, insulting. A lot, repetitive. Not one time, but 10 times, 100 times. You're so stupid. I'm so stupid. This person is so stupid. Why do we do this? Doesn't this beg the question? I'm sure every one of you knows this to some degree or another. And you can come up with a dozen of examples where this happened in the past. Maybe not computer, maybe you're a computer wizard, then it's something else. Who knows? But I'm sure everyone knows this, or has known this in the past. And the inner critic is a part of you, it's a part of your psyche, it's a part of your mind, is a part of your ego that has come into existence probably very early in your childhood. The inner critic is a manifestation of shame and guilt. We know from David Hawkins that shame and guilt are two of the strongest and most negative emotions there are for human beings. And this is the case here too. Right now, as an adult, shame and guilt are hard to bear. But as a child, shame and guilt are impossible to bear, impossible to stand. It feels like dying. And instead of dying, what the organism does is it splits off a part of yourself that has some kind of guardian function. It sacrifices itself for the good of the whole, for the continuance of the whole. The whole can survive by sacrificing one part of it. This part will then be split off until the point when we reintegrate it again. which usually never happens, because this part will become the inner critic. And we hate our inner critic. We hate this voice, this negative voice, nagging, bitching all the time. So the last thing we usually think about it is that is a part of ourselves that we have to reintegrate. But first we have to realize that it is a part of ourselves. First we have to realize it's not me. It tries to play all of us, all of me, but it's not. So it's not me, but secondly, it is also not me. It is a part of myself that I have split off some point somewhere in the past. And thirdly, this part will never shut up until I reintegrate it, until I accept that I have sacrificed it at some point because of some unbearable situation, and that there's a lot of pain there. There's shame, guilt, and emotional hurt at the root of it, which I have suppressed. This inner critic is actually some kind of guardian that does all this bickering for one reason: to prevent such a horrible situation to happen ever again. Unfortunately, he doesn't do a very good job of it. To the contrary, what often happens is that these kinds of situations are recreated in a mild way, or maybe it is a good job to do it that way, who knows. This inner critic, more or less consciously, creates situations like the first one that was so unbearable, where it was born, but in a mild way, so you can practice how to behave. When it happened the first time, you didn't know how to behave. You experienced it as life-threatening, so you dissociated and split off. Now, these situations, similar situations, are recreated so that you can find a way to deal with them. But usually we just get upset about this happening to us again and again and again, and then the inner critic gets even more critical. Oh, you're so stupid. Again, you chose a horrible partner like that. Why does this happen to me again and again? Well, the inner critic made it happen. But then if you fall for it and don't find a new solution, a better solution, then it will critique the hell out of you one more time. And will do so until your dying day, or until you solve this situation internally and get rid of your inner dialogue and realize that you are not your mind. Your mind is part of you, but you are not only your mind, and definitely not your inner dialogue. So remember, your inner dialogue has come into existence because of feelings of shame and guilt. So these are things you have to look into, and this will happen in choral. And usually people enjoy turquoise so much, I'm talking about spiral dynamics colors here, that they don't look into their deepest, darkest dungeons, and then they are surprised that coral is not a nice transition into teal. Stopping your inner dialogue is the number one goal for everyone who wants to transition into enlightenment, who wants enlightenment have to happen to them. That's the number one prerequisite, stopping your inner dialogue. And if you haven't managed stopping your inner dialogue so far, listen to your inner critic, what he, she, it wants to tell you. There's an important message there. and you can't get rid of the inner critic, you can just befriend this part again. Okay, please give this video a rating if you liked it. It helps others find this channel. Thank you to all my patrons, and thank you for joining me as a patron, and see you soon.